I went up on a couple of day trip from Tokyo up to the town of Minakami in Gunma Prefecture. The first day I was up there, I went down the Tone River. I think we flipped 3 times, and I got off the river and said, "This is awesome." you know.
That's Mike Harris, founder of Japan's first canyoning company, aptly named Canyons. Mike has quietly helped shape outdoor tourism in Japan and built one of the country's most successful rural businesses along the way. And his journey to this point is anything but typical. That trip he just mentioned changed everything for Mike, and he left Tokyo behind and moved to the mountains. From there, his journey took him across the globe, where he picked up skills in rafting, guiding, and canyoning that he eventually brought back with him to Japan. Fast forward to today, and Canyons has grown from a tiny garage operation to a multi-location outdoor adventure company. It's not just rafting and canyoning anymore. Canyons now runs ski schools, operates year-round, and employs a growing team serving robust amounts of both Japanese and international tourists. What's remarkable is that this all happened in a rural mountain town, and Mike's story is a case study in how to build a resilient and sustainable business outside of Japan's big cities. He's also been at the forefront of improving safety standards and shaping policy for adventure tourism nationwide. We'll dig into how it all started, how Canyons grew, and what Mike sees next for tourism in Japan's regional areas, but first, some housekeeping. The Property Adjacent podcast is brought to you by Patience Realty, your partner in Japan's residential real estate market. Patience Realty connects international clients with Japanese residences, exclusive resorts, and income-generating properties nationwide. Our Tokyo-based team provides tailor-made service to meet your unique needs. By dropping your email address on our website, you'll gain access to off-market property listings that aren't publicly available, giving you an edge in finding your ideal investment or dream home in Japan. In addition, Patience Realty offers bilingual property management services, including income generating and second home management, ensuring your assets are expertly handled. Non-resident owners can also benefit from our virtual bank account services for seamless domestic payments and rent collection. Finally, stay informed with Patience Realty Intelligence, where we publish daily guidance on Japan's real estate market, putting you on par with the Japanese consumer. Visit patiencerealty.com today to learn more. And now, without further ado, we're proud to present Mike Harris.
You're listening to Property Adjacent by Patience Realty.
Let's start with the very first question. What was the spark for creating Canyons in the first place?
Yeah, I guess, it was a little bit of a process, or it didn't just happen overnight. I was working in Japan, actually, in the ski industry. I was up in Hakuba way back in the day, before there was any foreigners there. I think there was maybe 5 foreigners in the village back in the early 90s. And I bumped into a Kiwi guy, and he told me about a friend of his that was starting the first rafting company in Japan. And I thought, oh, that sounds pretty awesome. But I'd always wanted to go down. I come from a smallish town in New Zealand, but I'd always wanted to go down and try and live in Tokyo, the big smoke, And so I put that on the back burner, and I was working down in Tokyo, ended up in Roppongi, as a lot of people do back in the day. About 3 weeks in, I had this little epiphany, probably about 3 a.m. after quite a few beers. I was like, wait a minute. There was a Kiwi guy, and his name was Chance, and he told me about this rafting opportunity, up in the mountains. I should really go check that out. So I still had the phone number that he'd given me for this guy, and I rang him up and said, hey, look, I've done some rafting in New Zealand. I'm pretty keen to sort of find out what you're up to. And he said, oh, look, we've just started out looking for more guides and more people to join. Come on up. So I went up on a couple of day trip from Tokyo up to the town of Minakami in Gunma Prefecture. The first day I was up there, I went down the Tone River. I think we flipped 3 times, and I got off the river and said, this is awesome. So I was like, man, I want to sort of, I don't want to be in Tokyo. I'm more of a nature person. I want to come up here. So I spoke to the guy and said, I'm keen to join the team. And so I started out rafting up in the mountains of Japan on the Tone River. And after a few years, I was, after the first year of rafting here, I was like, I want to gain more experience in other places as well. So I went back to New Zealand, did a season, came back to Japan, went to Australia, up in Cairns, did a season, came back to Japan, and then I ended up in Nepal. And a lot of people don't really have an image of Nepal, but the bigger the mountains get, the more gnarly the rivers get. So Nepal has some pretty big mountains. And as a result, the rivers over there are incredible. So on my second season, actually, I think going to Nepal, I was up in at the mountain resort by the Tibetan border, and there were some guys from Europe who were setting up the first canyons, the first canyoning operations in Nepal with the rafting company I was working with, and they were having to haul all this really heavy rigging equipment, bolts, and all the gear up to try and rig the canyons up. And they said to me, "Hey, look, can you come up and give us a hand? We're going to carry all this gear." And it's like, "Yeah, sure. I'd quite like to see what you guys are doing." So I started going up with these guys on my days off rafting and helping them rig these canyons. And they were showing me some canyoning techniques. And I was like, "Hey, this is really cool. I'd quite like to, I think there's a bit of potential in Japan to do this." So
What time frame are we talking about here? Is
this was around, so I was early 90s, sort of 1994 onwards, I was rafting in Minakami. Around about 1997, 98, I was in Nepal. 1998, spring, after the spring Nepal season, when I met these canyoning guys, and I thought, man, I should do this in Japan. So I came back to Japan and started looking around, and I'd been mainly focused on rafting and bigger rivers, but every now and then we'd go up and we'd check out some of the smaller creeks, So I started looking around. I was like, wow, there's all these amazing canyons in the town of Minakami. So I decided to start a canyoning business within the rafting business that I was managing at the time. So I said, look, I want to take the canyoning side of things and start to develop this. And the guy said, yeah, cool. There was a Japanese guy who was managing, sort of owned the company at that time. And I was managing the company for him. So he said, yeah, you go ahead, see how it goes. So started doing canyoning probably in spring of 98. And yeah, it was pretty green. It's just like a lot of trial and error, taking mates out and sort of figuring out what worked and what didn't, had some basic skills.
So the first spot was in Minakami then?
First spot was in Minakami. Yeah.
What was, I mean, it kind of gets into the next question is the place, because that's where I went and had a canyons experience, was in Minakami.
Yeah.
I was coming back from Nozawa. And on the way back, I was driving, and I thought, why not pop in here? Made a reservation, had a blast. It was fun. But I remember looking at the place, and I've always got a real estate eye on things. So I was looking at the land and looking at where it was situated. Obviously, it's a perfect place for a canyons type of business. But that's hindsight. When you first saw that place, was it like an epiphanic, this is it? Or was it, this is the best property available in a strike zone?
Yeah, so I guess that, once again, that was a bit of a build up, I'd been our current property where you came and visited, and where we still are now, that was sort of base number 3, I think. We didn't go in this. We didn't go in there straight away. I started out in a little garage. It was just me and a mate who, beside this other outdoor company that I was also managing, a tiny garage space with a bunch of gear, and me and one other guy who started guiding. When I first came to Minakami, it really felt to me like, I'm from southern New Zealand. It felt like Queenstown to me, just the natural resources, amazing mountains, huge series of lakes, great rivers, and lots of beautiful native forests and national parks. So it sort of had a really Queenstowny feel to me. But at that time, adventure tourism was just starting out, in the sort of mid 90s. So it's like, wow, this place has got so much potential from me coming from Queenstown and seeing how the adventure tourism scene was developing in New Zealand. But, there wasn't that many operators around back then. It was just, everything was just starting out. There was a lot of infrastructure already in the way of, it was a famous onsen town for a long time. So there's lots of hotels, ryokans, hot spring resorts, a lot of restaurants. So, and tourism infrastructure in the way of trains, bullet train and a local train already coming in here, an expressway that came all the way under sort of 2 hours access from Tokyo. So it had all these really, it ticked a lot of boxes in terms of what it could become for tourism. So yeah, we started out in a little garage. Then the next step was my wife's family had some land a little bit more up in the bush off the main road. So we built a shacky sort of style operation there. We were trying to obviously build up our funds along the way. But I'd always had my eye on the building that we're currently in. It's at the confluence of two rivers. We're a river-based company. We do rafting, we do canyoning. I love to be based alongside rivers. Beautiful view of the mountains. It was close to a lot of the courses that we ran. So we saw this great building, there in a perfect location that we realized hadn't been used for a few years.
And this is Minakami you're talking about.
This is the Minakami base, yeah. So
yes.
Our first HQ. And it was owned by Bosch, the power tools maker.
Is that so?
Yeah. And in Japan, I guess there was with the boom in the 80s, a lot of global companies set up bases in Japan. And, then a lot of Japanese officers, they bought these hoyojo or company holiday houses up in the mountains and all sorts of places. And in the 90s, when, things started to calm down in the Japanese economy, obviously Bosch head office started looking at the books and say, what are all these buildings and things that you guys have bought up and you're not even using them, and we've got to pay all these taxes every year. So they obviously wanted to get them off the books. So I still remember the first meeting I went in before we bought the building. I thought, man, this is a great location, great, huge facility, but it's got to be extremely expensive. And I remember going into this meeting with all the Bosch lawyers and real estate guys. They were 8 guys in these beautiful suits. I'm in there in my Canyons t-shirt and shorts and jandals. And I sat down and they started off the meeting saying, so we'd just like to say from the start, don't be afraid of giving us a super low price. I'm like, wow.
That was nice of them.
Yeah, it was really fortunate, and I think, they were looking to get it off the books. At that time, the economy was on the downturn, so there weren't a lot of people looking to buy. So it was sort of right place, right time, which quite often is the story, these sort of things. So we got lucky, and it was a Japanese holiday house, so it had a little bit of, it wasn't that sort of, it had a little bit of a stale sort of look to it, nasty old sort of green lino floors and things like that. So luckily I had a Kiwi mate who runs a construction company up here, Aoraki, and he does a lot of high-end builds. So I spoke to him and he sort of Kiwi'd it up, he got a lot of, local lumber. We did some local forestry and got a lot of oak trees and milled them ourselves, and then made the place a lot more woody and natural feeling. So yeah,
that matches the experience that I had. I remember walking in there going, wood's always, I'm always partial to wood, comfortable, warm, natural, that sort of thing. So that's what really stuck out for me there when I was there. Now I was also there in the green season. And I think a lot of people, when they think of the mountains in Japan, regardless of where they are, they think, predominantly snow, but we've so far been talking about the green season. What percentage of your business, you don't have to go into concrete numbers, but where is most of the business for canyons coming from? Is it 50-50 in green season and snow season, or?
Yeah, I mean, and that's another thing that's really changed over the years. We started out as a green season business, rafting, canyoning were our main things.
Oh, wow.
But as we progressed, a lot of our staff say, hey, we want to work in winter. And I just wanted to go skiing, to tell you the truth. But I just wanted to have winters off and go skiing. But everyone's like, hey, we've got families. We want to work year round. So around 2000 onwards, we started ski schools. And that was before the boom, but it gave us a good run-in period. And now the ski business is, the ski side of things is around about 60% of our overall business.
Okay, well, all right, interesting.
Yeah, so we now run locations in Minakami, obviously, where our home base is, in the Yuzawa area or Greater Snow Country. Nozawa is one of our big operations, and in the Myoko area. And we've got a couple of things that are coming up, but I can't quite talk about yet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Don't spill the beans, please. But it's fascinating that originally your business was driven on green season and in the Minakami, Myoko, Nozawa area, pulling people from Tokyo, basically weekend getaway folk. And then you expanded into the winter season. That from the outside looking in at present day, you'd think it'd be the opposite, is that, it was the snow that brought you there. It was the snow that brought the clients, and then you expanded in the green season, but not the case at all, eh?
No, I guess in late 90s, no one knew about snow in Japan. I remember, they had the 98 Olympics, which I was working at in Hakuba. And that was sort of a big turning point. And people started to go, wait a minute, Japan has snow? Before then it was the chosen few, the select few that sort of knew about Japan. There was a few snowboard movies and things coming out, but there wasn't really a lot of information. And, the internet was just starting to get more popular and sort of you'd be able to find more information. So really from the snow season stuff and inbound sort of was 2010 onwards where it really started to ramp up. Before that time, we were all green season, focused, and we thought, we'll keep on with this, the white season, the snow season stuff and see how it goes. And now obviously it's everyone knows about Japan and sort of the prowess of the snow season in Japan, but not too many people actually know about how awesome it is here in the green season.
And that's what I was going to say. I mean, I came to Japan in 2003, so not that far after the 98 Olympics, but, I don't think I went up to Niseko, for example, for the first time until closer to 2010.
Mm-hmm.
I had heard about it, but I'd never been there. And that whole, I landed directly in the center of Tokyo, the big smoke. It was pretty smoky.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't find my way out for a long time, but started going up to Niseko. And I remember what Niseko was back then and what it's turned into now. It's almost like now you've got to it's either remind people that there's a great green season, which actually is 3 different seasons and not just snow. And it seems like a real big challenge for places like Niseko and Hakuba that, hey, these are great summer locations as well. I guess given the nature of your business, it's been the opposite, no? When you started the business, obviously business probably was a bit slow, but then by the time you hit the snow, you were well known for green season in the area. Is my understanding on that correct? Am I missing the point?
Yeah. I guess we'd built up a pretty good reputation as an adventure tourism operator in the green season, and then we sort of just took all those learnings over to our snow season as well. But I think in the beginning, the green season for us, and even to some extent these days, it was mostly domestic clientele. We weren't relying on inbound tourism. So the snow seasons in Japan from the 90s onwards, the Japanese population of skiers and snowboarders was on a steady decline. But adventure tourism, rafting, canyoning, all these things were the next new bright shiny thing. So they were on a big sort of exponential sort of growth upwards.
As the domestic snow appetite was dropping, green season adventure was rising with the domestic population.
Yeah, very, very much so. So, and we were at the forefront of that, being the first people to be doing rafting, the first canyoning company in Japan. So we were pioneering a lot of that in the green season. So we saw tremendous growth in the green season side, and sort of Minakami was the first location really in Japan to really be the Queenstown of Japan, with a lot of operators really sort of popped up over the years. Now there's 38 outdoor companies in Minakami now, but that's just for the green season, bungee jumping, tree climbing, sort of river sup, lake sup, canoeing, pack rafting, sort of, there's so many things that go on here now. It really is sort of the mecca of Japan for the domestic market, but it's not really that well known so much for the international market as yet.
And it's the more people get exposed to the area, though, and we're finding this too, the more people that get exposed to the area, then it's kind of the scales come off the eyes and they're like, oh, wow, there's a lot more things here to do than I originally thought. And there seems to be a lot more opportunity here. And I'm not just talking about the Myoko area, but Hakuba, now even Nagano City.
Well, I mean, throughout Japan, I mean, it's, with the boom in inbound tourism now, and the actual, we see, people who are more focused on the ski industry or in ski towns, they see the massive boom in winter. But if you look at the bigger picture, sort of spring and autumn are the 2 biggest seasons for international tourists to come to Japan. So, and a lot of that, they're after nature-based, cultural-based sort of tourism. So there's huge potential for development in these ski towns. And that's in line with what you see overseas, the places like Queenstown, Whistler, Interlaken, places like this who are really leveraging the non-ski seasons now.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating thing to see from Tokyo. What percentage currently then, given the tourism boom, what percentage of your business is Japanese and foreign now?
Yeah, it's very different depending. We have a lot of different parts to our business. So in the winter, we are more inbound focused. So it'd be about 98% international, or inbound, or we do have foreigners that do live in Japan, some domestic foreigners, but yeah, it's very much international focused in the winter. We do run some activities and programs for domestic market because we have a lot of repeat clients, and they want to come up and do stuff with our guides and stuff over the winter as well. And then in the green season, we are around about 50-50 international versus domestic. You know, we have customers that come up every weekend. Every weekend they get out of Tokyo or Greater Kanto area, you know, they'll be up and doing activities and adventures with us. So, you know, we've had people that have come over on over 300 trips with us.
Wow. And that's family based, and I imagine that's family based, or is that just couples or?
And yeah, singles, families. You know, we have people that, you know, they started coming up to us when they're in their early 20s, and now they're in their 40s or 50s, you know, in their 40s with kids. So now they're bringing their families up to experience things, you know. So we get into the next generation.
How was the pandemic what impacted? I mean, obviously it wasn't a fun time or a good time for anybody. But what specifically in your line of work, what did that look like? Was that just no reservations at all for 2 years, or severely depressed? Or
so yeah, I guess the way Japan approached things was a little bit different from many other places in the world. There was no hard lockdown per se. You know, it was a very Japanese. We'd prefer it if you stayed at home, which, you know, so 95% of the Japanese will just go with what the government's recommending. But there was no hard, please, you're not allowed to travel, you know, things like this. The first part of 2020, those first 6 months, I think, at least up until around summer, we closed down our operations and we kept the staff employed, but we weren't taking bookings, and we were just trying to work out what's going on, as everyone was, what's going on and what can we safely do. So I spent a lot of time picking mountain vegetables up in the surrounding areas and boxing them up and sending them to our repeat clients and things like this, and had a really nice garden that year. But by summer, now we were sort of looking around the rest of the world and saying, well, what's the rest of the world doing, you know? And, you know, quite often, especially the Japanese government can be a bit slow with responding to things. So we were looking to Europe, because Europe had started their, you know, outdoor season. So Germany, Switzerland, Austria, and I had lots of mates in those areas who are running companies. So we sort of took the procedures that they put into place, and we used that as a baseline to create rules and procedures firstly for our own company, for Canyons. And then I'm also the head of the Outdoor Rengokai, which is the Outdoor Tour Operators Association in Minakami. So we had big meetings and say, okay, we think we can run things safely if we use these protocols and procedures. We had lots of meetings and we spoke about it. And obviously everyone wanted to operate, you know, and being in an outdoor environment, it's a lot safer. You know, you could do things potentially, you know, without putting people at higher risk. So we came up with some protocols, and then we took them to the local council and said, okay, look, we think we can start doing things on this one. And they said, okay, that sounds like you've put a lot of thought into it. And, you know, this is what's happening in Europe. This is best case practices from around the world. So by about, you know, late somewhere around July, we started doing some very, very sort of restricted operations, you know, sort of would have one boat going out with one group only. We'd only have one group per boat, and they'd have to sit this far away from the guides, and the guides would be wearing masks and everything, blah, blah, like this, you know, all the protocols and things that were in place for moving anywhere around that time. So yeah, the first year, 2020 was hard. By 2021, everyone was like, let us outside, you know, we want to get outside. Ski resorts and stuff like that season was still, you know, there was no international guests coming over still in 2021. So it was all the powder I could ever dream of. So resorts were pretty, and the Japanese government was great with sort of support for workers that couldn't work. So my ski instructors were stoked because they got paid to go and ride powder every day. And then by 2021, sort of spring onwards, we'd already had some things going last year. There was a bit more knowledge about what was going on. So things started to get back to quasi-normal. We could increase our capacity a little bit. And there was a real demand, you know, for people wanting to get outside. I think everyone sort of felt that after being cooped up and not being able to travel for a while, we want to get out there. We want to experience nature. We saw a lot of people wanting to move to Minakami or move to rural areas because they had a new appreciation of, wait a minute, I'm out in these rural areas. I've got all this freedom of space. I can grow my own vegetables, I can catch my own fish. Maybe I can hunt my own, food sort of thing. So a little bit more self-sustainable. So we saw a lot of people starting to move out into these areas as well. So I think it had a net positive effect on adventure tourism and nature-based tourism. And, I think like everyone, we learned a lot about sort of how to deal with these sort of things as well, and risk management.
So now we're well past restrictions. We're well past all of that. Things have roared back to life, and inbound tourism in Japan is back on its record-setting trajectory year after year. How's things now?
Yeah, I mean, inbound especially, it's absolutely booming. The last winter season was our busiest winter ever. And honestly, we can't keep up with demand. It's been pretty incredible. In places like Nozawa, Myoko, there is so much demand. Minakami is still not quite on the radar, which I've sort of enjoyed up to now because no one steals my lines. But even Minakami, we're seeing a big increase in inbound tourism, and that's sort of filtering through to the green season as well. I actually also run another travel company called Koro Travel, and we mainly focus on sort of rural adventure tourism and cultural-based tourism in smaller areas of Japan, and we've seen huge leaps in the demand in that as well. So yeah, it's Japan is booming. It's the hot ticket. I guess the thing is, how do they deal with sort of there's obviously areas, Kyoto, main cities in this list, sort of having issues with over tourism in some of the main sort of hotspots. So it's sort of how do you keep that quality and ensure that sort of that you keep the quality moving forward as the number of tourists increase.
Sounds like things are going great throughout that whole canyons journey. And before we get into what you're doing with regional tourism, let's just touch on this. Throughout the whole canyons journey, what were things that you thought would be a massive challenge that ended up in the end being not that big of a challenge? Something that surprised you?
Yeah, I guess, and this surprises a lot of people, there's actually no regulations at all for adventure tourism in Japan. That's on the ski side of things. I mean, you don't need any, and officially you don't need to have a certification to guide in Japan or even to be an instructor. There's no law that says you need that. It's the same thing for rafting, for canyoning. You could go out tomorrow and start at your own rafting company, Adam, and by law, no one can stop you, So in a way, there was no barriers to entry. So it was very, very easy to start. Coming from New Zealand where everything's highly regulated, there's a lot of hoops to jump through. It's a big process, guides, licenses, and things like this. Coming to Japan is like, there's nothing. So it was surprising how easy it was to start things up.
But wouldn't that then present a different challenge, because you'd pretty much have to self-regulate then? And I'm not saying that the government needs to come in and tell anybody what to do, but is that it's easier to start, but then while operating, is it easy to insure? Is it easy to enforce safety?
Yeah,
as well, or is that does that present another challenge?
Yeah, so the challenge that that creates is every man and their mother can go start one of those companies, and I guess in the 2000s that's what happened around a lot of Japan. So there's around 200 rafting companies in Japan, around 150 canyoning companies. Out of those 200 rafting companies, I'd say there'd be about 5 at international standard. So okay. You do have to self-regulate. And, we've seen a lot of accidents over the years. There's been rafting fatalities, canyoning fatalities. There's been a lot of diving and scuba diving fatalities down in Okinawa. And, I think their fatality rate is 10 times the fatality rate of the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. So there's obviously issues and problems that causes as well. And I've been spending a lot of my time, not so much recently, but definitely in the early days, lobbying the government to try and get some standards put into place. So in the absence of any sort of safety standards, guide standards, we pretty much reverted as a company to the New Zealand regulations, because that's where I come from. And New Zealand is, sort of was one of the leaders in the world for putting in adventure tourism regulations, because in the 80s, they went through all this. They created, a lot of companies were created, and a lot of people, there was a lot of incidents, a lot of things happened. And they figured, for this to be a sustainable industry, we've got to sort our stuff out. We've got to get proper safety regulations, quality, environmental regulations in place to make sure that this is becomes a sustainable industry. So I've actually had an audience with the Prime Minister and his cabinet, and explained about adventure tourism and the risks and what's happening at the moment, and this is what you need to do. And we did get some. Actually, this was 2019. So after sort of 20 years of banging my head against the brick wall and talking to every government agency and sort of getting pointed, just going around in a circle, chasing my tail, I finally had this thing, and they set up a team to sort of investigate and come up with recommendations, which I was part of as well. We set up, the first thing we did is we recognized that the diving and scuba diving incidents were way out of proportion. So let's start there. So we put in some guidelines. We couldn't make regulations by law because that's quite difficult. So we started out with some guidelines, and we got all the operators, the diving operators, snorkeling operators in Okinawa to come and join. And we created all these guidelines that the industry agreed with, and we just started to put them into place, and then COVID hit. And then,
oh, wow.
Yeah. And then all of that got put on the back burner. So the idea was, okay, let's put this into place and do a test case down in Okinawa with the diving and snorkeling. And then if that works well, let's move that through the rest of Japan. Then let's start working on, like mountain guiding and hiking and rafting and all these other adventure sports. So my task in the next couple of years is to go back and knock on the government's door and say, hey, remember that thing we started doing in 2019? We should go back there and get onto that again.
So it's kind of a nice segue into the second part of this conversation is, in addition to Canyons then being the ambassador for outdoor adventure tourism in Japan, tell us a bit more about your capacity in that regard.
In terms of government related work.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So I think when we were originally talking, advising regional municipalities on how to further bring people to the area.
So I guess over the years, as the Ministry of Tourism, I think got created, I think it was around 2010 or something like that in Japan. And until that time, there was no Ministry of Tourism, and the government realized that tourism could be a big thing for Japan. And that's when the word inbound tourism started to come out. So at that time, they started to look around and say, hey, do we have any specialists or sort of people that are good at doing this? And for some reason or another, my name sort of popped up on that list and said, you guys deal with lots of international tourists, help us out. So I sort of started doing some government work, firstly with the Ministry of Tourism and Ministry of Environment, going out and sort of advising on how do you bring more international tourists to national parks, and how do we create experiences for international tourists, and then how do we market or promote to international tourists? So I started out around 2010, 11, sort of going out on to some of these areas and advising. And over that time, I saw the real potential, but I also saw a lack of, you could go out and you could create some experiences, but there was no one there that could really package them together and sell it to the international market. So I saw the need to create a travel agency that specialized in that. JTB and a lot of the big guys who were focused on outbound, taking mostly Japanese tourists overseas. So, and they didn't really understand the needs of the international market back in those days. They've changed a little bit these days. But I created a DMC and a travel agent to bring tourists to Japan and sort of move them around these areas. And as a part of that, we have sort of a guiding area where we have a large number of guides who guide all around Japan. We have a DMC area where we create tours to try and take people to rural Japan, and then we have a consulting area of the business. That's where most of where I work in at the moment. So I spend a lot of time traveling to places that usually are not on the tourist route. Some of them are at different stages of the tourism development journey. Some of them are just starting out. Maybe they've only got one accommodation in town. They haven't got any guides. They haven't got a clue of what experiences they need to make. And then others already have a lot of tourism infrastructure, but they may have some guides and they may have some other people, but they don't know how to create an experience that maybe the international market are looking for. And the international market is very broad. It could be, because, what maybe someone from maybe Taiwan or Thailand is looking for, maybe something very different from what a German tourist or American tourist is looking for.
Well, just so people understand too, we're not entirely just talking about places that are, very, very rural. I mean, I was down even in Nagasaki last year, and I hadn't been down there in a very, very long time. And, they were lamenting that they don't have enough foreign tourists. And that kind of really opened my eyes that even a mid-sized city like Nagasaki is not participating in these record-setting inbound numbers. So like you're not like, I think so listeners have a good idea. I mean, I imagine, or correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm imagining you're not just going into the rural city offices. It's actually 500,000 to 1 million population cities that are trying to get their share, right?
Yeah, for sure. And there's places like Hiroshima, and Hiroshima gets a lot of guests, but they get a lot of guests to the Peace Park and to Miyajima. They're all focused. So Hiroshima's like, how can we get, Hiroshima's a large prefecture. There's lots of other cool stuff around. So, so I went down there and with one of the local operators, we started doing some canyoning stuff and some forest walks on some historical trails, and then some sea kayaking around some of the other smaller islands, seeing, the story of the oysters and things like that. So there's a lot of ways to try and, I guess, diffuse the over tourism that, they're all focused on these 2 or 3 spots within certain areas. So, and then as you said, in the rest of Japan's a huge place, and you go down to Kagoshima, and Kagoshima City is an amazing city in southern Japan, Kumamoto, and then some of the rural areas around there, and they just don't get the tourists that a lot of other areas get. So, but there's some amazing content and experiences that are very unique and different to other parts of Japan. So that's what I really enjoy. It's I've been living in Japan a long time now, but I keep on going to different areas and finding some amazing new content and stories. I was working in I've been working up in Akita Prefecture in northern Japan for a few years now, and there's some hunter gatherers called the Matagi, who are sort of get a bad rap. They just everyone calls them the bear hunters, and they hunt bears for about 1 month of the year, but the rest of the year I call them the guardians of the forest, because they go and pick mountain vegetables, they pick mushrooms, they hunt rabbits, they hunt other things, but they only ever take what the Yama no Kami, what the mountain gods give them, and they keep things in a nice sustainable balance. And
when you say hunter gatherers, I mean, I'm assuming you don't mean like uncontacted tribes living off the land, roaming about, or is that
no? So they come from hunter-gatherer tribes from back in the early days. They're sort of related from the Jomon period, from the first people, around sort of 10,000 years ago. All their techniques come from that. Now they live in houses, of course. They like anyone else. In that era, there was also a lot of Ainu, and there's another sub-tribe called the Emishi, which a lot of people haven't actually heard about, but a lot of some of their language, they have their own sort of language when they walk into the forest and things like this. Now they live in houses, they have rifles, they have guns, they do trapping, but a lot of the current techniques and culture and customs have been passed down to like 10,000 years. So, and that's still, some of that's still alive. So you can actually go and experience some of this in northern Japan. So we put together like a 2-night, 3-day Matagi experience tour, where you go stay with the Matagi. There's actually, in the US at the moment, there's a really popular style of fishing called tenkara, which is sort of the roots of fly fishing, where they use like a long bamboo rod with a dry fly, and it's actually really hard. You got to flick out the fish just at the right time. But that came from the Matagi people, northern Japan, and their culture and their style of hunting spread all right down to Nagano and all throughout Japan. So, a lot of people don't, you don't hear about these other subtribes. A lot of people know about the Ainu. A lot of people haven't heard about the Emishi or the Matagi or a lot of these other sort of peoples that were around other parts of Japan.
Fascinating. I'd heard of, I'm in that camp too. I'd heard of the Ainu, but I never heard of the other two. Definitely going to look that up after this conversation. Where do we go from here? Where do you see it in your vast experience of outdoor tourism in regional areas in Japan, not only with canyons, but with your consulting work as well? Where do you see the next 5-10 years going?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of investment from the government at multiple levels to try and develop tourism in, sustainable tourism in rural areas at the moment. there's a lot of funding. Pretty much the government pays me to go into these areas, and I'm one of hundreds of consultants or rural tourism developers that goes in to do these things. So the government's pushing for tourism in Japan, but they can see that a lot of the main areas are saturated. So in order to increase their tourism revenue, they've got to utilize more of these rural areas. And the rural areas need more revenue coming in to be more sustainable. There's the brain drain, or the drain of young people going to the cities because just working in agriculture isn't so sexy for some people, not that working in tourism is very sexy sometimes, but, you can create a lot more interesting jobs in tourism. So I think the government sees tourism as the tool to revitalize rural areas. And if you look at other cases throughout the world, and even within Japan, that's already happening. Places like the Kumano Kodo, there's a little town down there called Tanabe City, and the Tanabe tourism guys have done amazing efforts to get all of the locals on board. And now there's young people moving back into the area. There's little B&B accommodation starting up. The old people that are living there are working in tourism. So I can already see, there's some successful models in Japan that are really revitalizing these rural areas. So I think it's going to keep on moving in that direction.
Is it only tourism related, or is tourism seen as the spear point of perhaps other foreign direct investment for these regional areas?
I think tourism is the spearhead, and it's a great way to create awareness about different areas. But then obviously tourism and agriculture, tourism and sort of other industry, getting people to go and live in these areas, getting people to build holiday houses in these areas, come and spend more of their time there, and then that's what we've seen happen in places like Niseko and Hakuba and other places. Then that creates more kids, more schools, more people living there, and it has this big trickle down effect for everything, really.
More taxes, more social services.
Exactly, and I don't want to say Niseko is a fantastic model. I mean, it is one model, but tourism can be a force that does bring a lot of economic and social economic benefits into there if it's done correctly.
If tourism's not the end game, how does Japan not become Bali or Phuket that are predominantly known basically for tourism-driven economies?
Yeah, I think the question is exactly that. What does the area want to become? And that needs to be asked to all the stakeholders that are there at the start. And there needs to be sort of a plan that's built together with the community. So tourism is one tool, but it should be a tool to make the standard of living better for the people that are living in that area. So it shouldn't be taken over,
The way you're saying it sounds like you said it a lot, many times to a lot of many groups. Am I correct? Is my intuition there correct? Or
I speak about it a lot. Also at the moment, I'm updating my GSTC Global Sustainable Tourism Council certification. So I've just been doing some online study once again about this, but it's something I'm very passionate about. I think one of the ways that these rural areas can do that, because it's hard to say, well, where do we start? How do we do that? So you can use tools like green destinations, the GSTC, or in Japan, they have one called the JSTDs, which was developed from the Global Sustainable Tourism Council protocols, which I actually helped develop. So, there's a lot of blueprints out there that can help rural areas to say, okay, where do we need to start? How do we actually go about doing this? And I think, community involvement, a lot of time in rural areas, you'll see the city council, they'll sit in their office with one department will come up with 100-page manual of this is how we move forward. But it needs to have community involvement, it needs to have industry involvement, it needs to be created together. So I think a lot of these tools that are out there, green destinations, GSTCs, there's a bunch of other things, are really good tools to be able to sort of for these local area governments to be able to use to move forward.
And the stakeholders are not just the people living there, but business operators and elected officials.
Local government officials, local business industry, representative organizations, the tourists that are coming there, that regularly, things like this. Obviously, the people that live there. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of, and that's one of the first jobs is who are our stakeholders?
Identifying the stakeholders. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Labor crunch everywhere, it seems. How's it affecting your business?
Yeah, I think it affects certain parts of our business. With our guiding instructors, things like that, we never really have problem because a lot of people want to come and work in Japan. You know, it's a cool place to experience. It's more in some of the more maybe not mundane jobs, but maybe not quite as sexy, you know, working washing dishes in the kitchen, you know, sort of other things like working admin jobs and stuff like that. You know, there is a shortage of Japanese workers, you know, because they're in high demand. Luckily, we have a really good connections with overseas, so you know we can pull on really good pools of people from different countries that a lot of our staff are based in, and we have a good reputation so for looking after our staff. So, in terms of guides and instructors, we've got probably more than enough flow coming in. We're doing our recruiting now for winter, and it's like, whoa, the floodgates have opened. But yeah, there are definitely like we run a cafe restaurant in Okutama down in Tokyo, and we're it's hard to find people that are in that area that want to work in that industry. So definitely some, and we see that at a lot of the ryokans, the hotels and ryokans. There's a huge shortage of staff. So now it's a lot of staff from mainly around Asia, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Myanmar, Indonesia. Many staff from these countries that are coming in. You know, and a lot of them, they learn Japanese, they learn a lot about the culture over here, but sometimes there is a little bit of cultural difference and it can be hard.
Helping foreigners who want to work here get visas, have you noticed it becoming more challenging lately, or is it the same, or is it actually easier in your experience?
I think it's actually becoming way easier. I think back in the day, I got the first rafting visa in Japan for myself, way back in the day when I started working for the other company. Since then, we got the first mountain guide visa. We've got the first canyoning guide visa. The immigration understands that there's a shortage, and they have good contact, with the other departments, and they've started having conversations with industry. So they've actually made it easier to get people, and now they have a ski instructor's visa they never had before. For some reason, they don't accept snowboarders yet. I don't know why, but definitely the immigration laws and rules in Japan have gotten easier because they realize there is a shortage, so they need to draw from that pool of international workers.
I imagine throughout your career you've seen a lot of international people come and go. Say someone's listening to this overseas right now thinking, yeah, I need to talk to Mike, I want to go talk to Canyons, I want to get to Japan. What advice would you give that aspiring Japanophile prior to applying or prior to making the big plunge like we did and move to Japan?
Yeah, I think it'd be good to come here for a bit of it, for a short trip or something first. Come for a month or 6 weeks and travel around Japan, have as many different experiences as you can, figure out where you want to be, what you want to be doing, because there's so many options. The cities are amazing, but if you really love Japanese culture and really want to learn the language, then I recommend get out to a rural destination, and get amongst the locals. That's where you're really going to absorb the culture and feel like you've become part of the community.
Visiting versus living here, what are some of the challenges in your opinion? What are some of the things that are not seen on the surface when you're only visiting?
Yeah, I guess, there's a lot of maybe inefficiencies in some of the systems with where you live in the city councils and doing taxes and sort of paying for medical health insurance and all these things that are great health system, but then sometimes, the actual health and sort of system itself, hospitals and the doctors are great, but sometimes paying all the bills and keeping up with stuff and sort of, all this kind of stuff. If you don't know the language, can be, I'm getting all these letters. I wonder what that means, Probably got a little bit easier now with Google Lens and a few of the other, new technologies, but you do spend a bit of time going down into immigration every how many long your visa is, renewing your visa and all the other things go around that,
Awesome. So tell everybody in closing about the birthday discount that Canyons offers.
So once you come up and do a tour with us, 1 month before your birthday, you're going to get a 50% discount coupon sent to your email. And if you use that within the month of your birthday, then you can come get a half price tour.
So that's the month before and the month after.
Exactly.
All right. So birthday discounts at Canyons. Take advantage of it. Get while the getting's good. Mike, thanks very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Great talking to you, Adam. Cheers.
We hope you enjoyed hearing Mike's unique insights, and we thank him deeply for his time. Very, very much appreciated. You can learn more about Canyons in the description notes wherever you're listening from. Our theme music was provided by Cheel with the song titled Kurt, found in the YouTube Creator Studio audio library, with transition sound effects by various creators found on Pixabay. That British lady you heard after our house advertisement, her name is Lily, and she's a text-to-AI generated voice provided by 11 Labs. No AI bots were harmed in the making of this podcast, and remember, life is only rented, never owned, so please be as kind as possible. For Property Adjacent, I'm Adam German saying thanks for listening and bye for now.
You've been listening to Property Adjacent by Patience Realty.